Brian Denny has been fishing these waters in southern Tasmania since he was a kid.
What do you reckon? Up around the corner?
I started off snorkelling along the shoreline in Dover when I was probably about 9 or 10 years old. Just one of those things. I've always wanted to be a fisherman or a diver.
He's worked on crayfish boats, dived for periwinkles, and 2 decades ago he started commercially diving for abalone.
It's one of those surreal things, and being a diver we get to see a lot of different things that normal average day people won't ever get to see, and we call it our office.
The shellfish that Brian Denny dives for is a sought-after delicacy in Australia and overseas. Live greenlip and blacklip abalone can retail for $100 a kilo. Local Aboriginal communities have been fishing and sharing abalone for thousands of years.
It's one of those things, you sort of get that sense of pride.
Under legislation for cultural fishing, Tasmanian Aboriginal people can harvest some abalone for personal use without a licence, but there hasn't been a dedicated Indigenous commercial fishery until recently. A year ago, the state government signed a groundbreaking deal with the Land and Sea Aboriginal Corporation of Tasmania to create one, handing over a quota allowing for 9 tonnes of commercial fishing a year.
The idea behind it is keep it small and try and keep it all here so that our people, as well as other communities, can have a feed of our abalone.
Brian Denny is the fishery's first diver. The Malakadee man's focus is sustainability, and he's decided not to catch any of the sea snails in the peak spawning times of January and February to help protect stock levels.
The way we're looking at it was, if those animals are left in the water to spawn, then it's our little bit for what we do culturally to make sure that an area is sustainable.
For many Tasmanian Aboriginal people, abalone has been a food that gives us a sense of belonging and place. It allows us to be on country and connect to country and our heritage.
70 years since commercial abalone fishing began in Tasmania, the island state has the largest wild fishery in the world, but about 95% of the product is exported. Of those people with a quota to harvest abalone, about a third live outside Tasmania, and most are investors rather than active divers.
We wouldn't ask the question, are we happy with that as Tasmanians?
Trawulway woman Professor Emma Lee has conducted 7 years of research into cultural fisheries, looking at how Tasmanian Aboriginal people could be involved in the commercial abalone industry and shift the thinking about fisheries management.
So at the moment, commercial fisheries is about what is the level of maximum extraction. We'd like to think about what's the biological health of sea country as a baseline.
Emma Lee's research involved speaking to elders about how best to look after the fishery. One of those was Rodney Dillon, a driving force behind the Indigenous abalone fishery. He's been arrested and fined thousands of dollars for taking more than his allowable personal quota of abalone over the past 3 decades, something he's argued is a cultural right.
They tried to process us as criminals. If we'd have been catching fish to sell, we'd have been driving around in F100s like everyone else, and we wasn't. We was just catching them for our families to eat.
He feels there's still a long way to go in recognising cultural fishing rights, but the commercial fishery is a step in the right direction.
This is not about people being fearful. This is about us working together and being able to go down a road of shared history and culture.
Our direction to put abalone on the menu was because we felt that there was a need for it. There was a demand for it. People were asking for it as customers.
So that's the mussel that sticks to the shell, inside the shell. just trimming it off just here at the end.
Nathan Chilcott is the executive chef at a Hobart seafood restaurant. For him, putting abalone on the menu was a no-brainer, but sourcing that abalone from the Indigenous fishery was a very deliberate decision.
I just thought it's a beautiful connection of having that Aboriginal or Indigenous community, bringing in our own locally sourced abalone.
We'll just finish it off by putting a little bit more abalone.
The restaurant sells 5 to 10 serves of the shellfish a day to both local diners and tourists.
Definitely there should be more locally distributed abalone within the hospitality industry and throughout restaurants.
We're trying to sell as many fish locally as we can to encourage people to come to Tasmania and eat that fish. We're not going to turn it all around, but if we can turn 20% of the industry to stay in Australia, like what I do think, it's not only about bringing other people from other parts of the world, but it's our people eating the fish that belongs here.
The current agreement is for 3 years, but the aim is that the fishery will be able to expand and continue without government help, giving Aboriginal people a permanent voice in the industry.
With the money that we get back off our quotas, we're trying to buy more quota with it. Strictly, that's all we're trying to do. I think it's a great model to be used in South Australia, New South Wales and Victoria, and they're already asking about it.
Brian Denny hopes to continue fishing sustainably, so there's a future for more young Aboriginal divers in the cultural commercial fishery.
I think that's the biggest answer is don't take them all out of the water. You've got to leave something behind or not fish it as hard so that there's going to be, an abalone fishery there for generations to come.